Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 409. Climax. Part 1. Every muscle on my body ached as if I had been thoroughly beaten up. I had blacked out for a second but regained my consciousness somehow. I vomited out fables and opened my eyes within the pitch-black empty space. I couldn't see a single thing nearby, but I already knew where I was. Indescribable distance is glancing at you. The indescribable distance, also known as the nameless mist. I ran into this guy's clone back in the 73rd demon world. With nothing but the strength of a clone, this guy destroyed my demon world, and went on to break fable-grade constellations and transcenders alike. And here I was, right inside the mouth of one calamity that I dearly wished not to meet again. Kim Dokja thought to himself. This is the only way to stop the apocalypse dragon. Right. I was wondering why you were keeping quiet until now. In order to stop the world's calamity, summon yet another one. Only someone like the regressor Yu Yun Hyok might come up with such an idea. I looked at the 4th wall's messages floating up in the air and chuckled wryly. Even then, Kim Dokja simply had to do it. The effects from the storm of aftermaths still lingered in my vicinity. You have distorted far too much probability. You keep this up, and all the probabilities karma you've accumulated so far will blow up in your face. You know what that means, don't you? This was the probabilities karma that I had been accumulating until now. The retribution that constellations and akibis had warned me about. There is no fable where something precious hasn't been lost. Every large, great fable found in Starstream was a story of loss. In order to awaken a hero, something must be sacrificed, while lovers and friends must lose something when trying to fulfill their love or friendship. Someone had to lose something, and with that, fables would become complete. Kim Dokja hated that. I knew that one day, I'd be paying the price for not losing out on anything. That the time to pay for twisting stories around and distorting the probability would arrive sooner or later. And that was why Kim Dokja decided to use that. Suchachachuchit. More lumps of fable poured out of my mouth. This wasn't because the indescribable distance attacked me, no, it was the distorted probability's fault. The distortions of the world, saved up for the purpose of summoning an outer god, was trying to eliminate me from the scenario itself. Fable, Demon King of Salvation, is continuing with its storytelling. I managed to endure only because of my fables. They continued to whisper into my ears, they said that you're the Demon King of Salvation. You must save people. Just like how they did to Metatron and Agar's, fables were whispering to me. Fable, King of Kingless World, is continuing with its storytelling. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, is continuing with its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch That Swallowed the Myth, is continuing with its storytelling. Even though I was inside the quaking fog of darkness, I still could sense what was happening outside. Final dragon of the Book of Apocalypse is bearing its animosity towards the indescribable distance. Indescribable distance is making its move. Thankfully, everything was unfolding according to the plan. The outer god showing up to devour me had discovered an even tastier prey, and it was now far too focused on preying on the final dragon of the Book of Revelation. The fight between calamities had begun. The final dragon versus the nameless mist. These two's mutual destruction was the hope of all the other existences. The most important thing was to buy enough time. Enough time for the constellations to reorganize themselves, for those damn stars to reform the nebulas, befitting their lofty titles. Damage to your incarnation body is critical. Indescribable existence's status is eating into your context of modifier. Unity between fables is weakening. Starstream is stunned by your extraordinary achievement. Your own great fable is waking up. I heard something faintly resembling a song from afar. It was a melody I heard a long time ago. I wasn't sure whether that was my mother's, from my comrades, or from someone else. Except that, as I listened to that faint song, Fable, Comrade of Life and Death, is continuing with its storytelling. I realized that I didn't want to die. Goo. One world was colliding with another. Kim Dokja, completely exposed to the apocalypse dragon's shockwave, was swallowed up by the jet-black fog of darkness. And now, it was no longer him dealing with the shockwave, but that horrifying outer god, instead. The two powers born from chaos collided, and everything near their vicinity was sucked into nothingness. Constellation, guardian of Mandala, is gasping out. Thankfully, the collision location was much further away than it looked, so the companions still on the ground were spared. Complexions of most constellations were incredibly poor after having witnessed both the apocalypse dragon and an outer god. As if all those days where they roamed the heavens like kings were nothing but illusions, calamities that not even fable-grade constellations could handle were engaging in bitter warfare. Only then did the constellations of the night sky realize the truth, that the end of the world was indeed right in front of their faces. For a certain someone, though, a person's sacrifice was a much bigger tragedy than the end of the world. Ajasina Yi. E.G. Hai yelled out in sheer desperation and fired her cannons at the fog of darkness. Of course, none of the cannon shells could damage the main body of the nameless mist. One couldn't even tell where its body started and ended, after all. Unfortunately, the companions were unable to control their overwhelming emotions. No, no, no. Xing Yusung fitfully cried out as if she had been inflicted with an illness of repeating the exact same words. And as if it was resonating with her emotions, the chimera dragon spat out one breath after another in the air. The eyes of Yi Gilyong, standing next to them, were half blurry, unfocused. As his entire body quivered, ominous demonic aura began oozing out from him. Contract. I will. I won't, will. And in front of these three, another three stepped forward. Facing the horrifying calamity that they had been dreading all along, each of the companions lost their reasoning in their own ways. Some let themselves go, falling to a flood of emotions, while others managed to hold on to their broken reasoning in some elaborate manner. Yu Yunghyak unleashed his transcended form. Han Suyang was draped by the black flame dragon. And Zhang Huiwen had opened the eyes of godslaying. Without giving anyone a chance to stop them, the three stepped forward at the same time, and they glanced at each other. Then, someone else did stop them from the front. It was Anna Croft. All of you, please stop. You mustn't break away from the battlefield. Nebula, Asgard, is currently commanding the battlefield. Anna Croft's voice, along with Asgard's great fable, managed to tie all three of them to their spots. Yu Yunghayak's expression crumpled unsightly. Get out of my sight. This isn't what the Demon King of Salvation wanted. What the Demon King of Salvation wanted. Han Suyang's left arm was lit in black flames, as if there was no more need to listen here. Anna Croft quickly spoke. I'd begun seeing bits of the future. The fables were now flowing within her, eye of the great demon. It might be that this is because he has really done it. Anna Croft sounded genuinely impressed. She looked at the fierce battle of the two calamities taking place in the distant sky and spoke. To save this world, he really... God damn it. Who cares about saving the world and shit? We want to. His sacrifice is truly noble. Do you not understand what that means? You better shut your mouth. Han Suyang blew her top and roared out. Her scary aura managed to momentarily shut Anna Croft up. Why should Kim Dokja save this world? Why should that bastard sacrifice himself for such a stupid waste of time? Is this stinking world even worth saving? Her voice was cracking up from anger. It was a voice belonging to someone who had been suppressing her rage over and over again. The prophet looked at that face, and listened to that voice, and recalled a story from her past. The Demon King of Salvation also said the same thing once upon a time. Whether this world is worth protecting or not, one should wait and see first. Was it back during the Gourmet Association? The Demon King of Salvation once said that to her. Anna Croft knew very well what he meant back then. This world was one being ruled by Dakibis and constellations. She, too, created Zarathustra's in order to change this world, after all. Anna Croft raised her head and looked at the sky once more. Even as a prophet, she couldn't tell if he was still asking that question of this world. However, he's over there right now. Some fables were to be proven not by words, but through one's actions. He has met you people in this world, has he not? For the first time ever, the three's expressions changed to something quite similar to one another after hearing her. Anna Croft continued on with a cautious tone of voice. Please, have faith in me, the prophet. We need to save up our strength, and then aim for the moment when the two calamities fight each other and destroy themselves. Only then will our survival be guaranteed. Prophet? You think you're the only one who can tell the future? That was when Anna Croft realized something. Han Suyang's surrounding vicinity was overflowing with the fable of predictive plagiarism. The regressor Yu Yonghyuk was studying and observing the situation without rest through his eye of sage. In the meantime, it wasn't only the prophet who could predict the future. These two also possessed insight far superior to others when it came to reading future events. Even then, they still chose to save Kim Dokja. Zhang Huiwen unsheathed her sword and spoke. I don't know anything about the future. However, I do know this. You said that you want to save this world? It's the same for me, too. Her determination manifested in the whitish flames billowing on the sword of judgment. That man is the world I wish to save. At the end of those words, all three of them dashed into the air. Not the probability of the great fable, and not even the pressure from a nebula could stop them from leaving. Anna Croft urgently reached out, but by then, they were already soaring towards the distant heavens. The thing that stopped them, though, was not a nebula nor probability. Han Suyang was the first one to discover that thing. What the hell? Son of a... Kugugugugu. The equilibrium of the heavens was collapsing under the continued battle of the two calamities. The new problem had to do with the crumbling balance of the broken scale invading into this world. Isn't that? One of the constellations muttered out. Something hidden within the fog of darkness blanketing the skies wiggled and began separating itself. Not content with pressuring the apocalypse dragon, the indescribable distance, aka the nameless mist, had begun creating a clone from itself. A sickly yellow eye of terror revealed itself among the fog of darkness. Xin Yusung's shoulders began trembling non-stop as if a nightmare of the past managed to creep back into her consciousness. She had seen that eye before. Incarnations who saw that eye would fail to hold on to their minds and eventually transform into creatures of the outer world. On that day, all existences of the industrial complex were rendered completely powerless in front of that calamity. However, there was someone here who remembered that day's events quite differently from her. It's slightly smaller than that day, I see. It was Chiok Junjiang. Chapter 410. Climax. Part 2. Chiok Junjiang unsheathed his sword as he stepped forward. His fables, tempered on the Isle of Reincarnators, wrapped around him and rippled about like real muscles. Let us get going, small transcender. Kyrios climbed up on Chiok Junjiang's shoulder. They once worked together to fight the indescribable distance in the past. The latter leapt up towards the heavens, and Kyrios's lightning transformation danced on his blade next. And as the bright, pure white electrical current enveloped Chiok Junjiang's figure, he began glittering like a god of lightning. I, Chiok Junjiang, have been waiting for this day. A splendid status revealed itself. The enemy that his sword, used to cut apart mountains and the seas, couldn't cut, was now right before him. He trained hard to perfect the incomplete fourth sword for this very moment. In order to fight against that sheer, immeasurable emptiness, he spent countless hours creating a sword skill. And this was the result. His fable, condensed tightly until it was almost ready to burst, was ignited, and Kyrios's electrical current violently spun around in their vicinity. Constellations on the ground all looked up. One constellation and one transcender. As if to mock these two statuses, the clone of the indescribable distance opened its maws wide towards them. And just before the open jaw of the fog of darkness swallowed up the starlight. The fourth law. Light gushed out from Chiak Junjiang's sword. Fourth sword that beheads the emptiness. The center of the fog slowly split apart, just like the belly of a beast being sliced open. Something began leaking out from that exposed center. The yellowing eye protruding from the fog of darkness began to disintegrate while spewing out fables. Many constellations cannot take their eyes away from the martial glory displayed by Goryeo first sword. The jaws of many constellations have fallen at this unbelievable spectacle. All the constellations on the ground were astonished by what they saw. Even if it was just a clone, their opponent was still the indescribable distance, the cleaner of star stream and the calamity that devoured all distorted probability. The calamity widely known as undefeatable, was cut in half by Chiak Junjiang. No one even managed to clearly catch the shape of that sword strike. Only Yu Yonghyuk managed to recognize that attack. Even the man who previously sliced a star in half looked utterly stunned right now. The will-formed blade. The power to cut the world down with nothing but one's own determination, the pinnacle reputedly only reachable through training in martial arts. And Chiak Junjiang had reached that lofty height after becoming a constellation. There is no existence that cannot be cut down by my blade. Standing within the exploding light show, Chiak Junjiang watched the scattering fog and felt the sense of release wash over him. Just how long did he endure, just to be able to cut that thing? That ecstasy of the moment, when he stepped into the realm of empty-mindedness, and his will itself became the sword. The four-sword style's fourth sword that beheads the emptiness was the accumulation of all the martial arts he had mastered. He looked in Yu Yonghyuk's direction and shouted out. Now go, descendants. Go and bring Kim Dokjae. Unfortunately, he didn't get to finish what he was saying. An incredible impact force from behind managed to wreck his entire incarnation body. He fell like a meteor and crashed deeply into the ground. As his vision rocked unstably, he forced himself to look up, and that's when he realized what had happened to him. Someone began muttering near him. Oh, dear Lord, Star Stream might be finished at this rate. He couldn't understand it. Chiak Junjiang felt his body tremble uncontrollably. But, how? I cut it down just now, so how? As if what happened a moment was all a joke, the giant eye in the sky was still looking down on him. There was more than one clone. So many, in fact, the whole sky seemed to be covered by them. Clones of the indescribable distance, dozens upon dozens of them, were descending to the ground in order to devour every living thing down below. Yuak. Historical figure-grade constellations, overcome by terror, began running to the other side of the horizon. Unfortunately, the calamity also flooded in from that side as well. Krayak. Fangs rising up from within the fog crushed the incarnation bodies of the constellations like the soft pulp of a fruit. There was no place to run nor hide now. Although slightly better than dealing with the apocalypse dragon's shockwaves, this situation was just as despairing, nonetheless. Everyone, calm down. You all saw it, didn't you? We can fight back against this creature. Dionysus shouted until his voice turned hoarse, but constellations simply couldn't fight together. Damn it. Constellations from Olympus had spent a considerable amount of their statuses while enduring against the two previous shockwaves and couldn't display their usual prowess now, and even Underworld had used up far too much of its probability and was searching for the right fable. At least, Uriel and the Black Flame Dragon were still putting up a good fight. Get lost. I said, get the hell away from me, you stinking bastards. Yu Yonghyuk, Han Suyang, and Zhang Huiwen unleashed their statuses, their backs pressed against each other. They were planning to continue fighting against the fog of darkness and rush towards where Kim Dokjae had disappeared into as soon as an opening was created. However, no such gap opened up for them. At this rate, they would be wiped out before they even began rescuing him. God damn it. Isn't there anyone else? Isn't there any other friends of Kim Dokjae still left somewhere? No matter how much Han Suyang racked her brain, she couldn't come up with anyone that could help. Both the statuses of the Black Flame Dragon and Uriel were gradually declining now. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is glaring at scribe of heaven. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, says he still can't use the right hand of the void destruction. The fog of darkness had enveloped the Isle of Reincarnators, which was about the same as it having finished its preparation to devour this place whole. It was around then when the specks of light akin to a car's headlights shone from the distance. Along with loud screeching, something arrived by their side after breaking past the deflagration. A vehicle rather familiar to the members of Kim Dokja Company appeared from beyond the choking dust. It'll get rather troublesome if you get injured here. You still have 3 more adverts you need to shoot for me, after all. The door to the X-Class Ferragini opened, and the gray-haired middle-aged man waved his hand with a smile. He wore a pink-colored polo shirt with images of pineapples etched on it, plus a torn pair of jeans. Han Suyong saw his outrageous fashion sense that simply didn't match the current battlefield, and her jaw fell to the ground. Mass production type maker? Several constellations fighting against the calamity began muttering to each other after hearing her. Mass production type maker? Is he a strong constellation? No, that geezer won't be of much help. I think I've heard about him before. Blinded by coins, he continues to pump out trashy fables. Han Suyong stared at that mass production type maker. He was supposed to be a fable-grade constellation, but contrary to his rank, the status she could feel was nothing to write home about. The mass production type maker chuckled good-naturedly. Hoo-hoo. It seems that I come across as not all that reliable. His relaxed observation prompted Thor to stop chugging wine down his throat and shout back. Oh aye, Mr. Steady. Since you came, hurry and lend us a helping hand. We urgently need any help we can find, even from a geezer. But I didn't come here to fight. Then why the hell did you even come here for? Well, I was thinking of sponsoring some coins, you see. You mad geezer. What good will that do right now? Constellations couldn't hold their anger back and shouted out. If you shut up to spout nonsense, then get the hell away from here. A stinking old man blinded by coins. Strangely enough, the mass production type maker didn't show any signs of cowering. It was at that moment Han Suyong recalled a certain conversation she had with Kim Dokja in the past. While she was glancing at the mass production type maker chatting to Dakibis outside the recording booth, she asked him. Hey, Kim Dokja. Just who is that constellation, anyway? He doesn't seem all that strong to me. Why are those Dakibis groveling before him like that? Kim Dokja replied as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because he's got a lot of coins. Like Kim Dokja back then, the mass production type maker was grinning brightly right now. I can't understand you young ones. Why do you all dismiss coins like that? Who cares about those consumables? Along with a spinning noise, a coin popped up on top of the mass production type maker's palm. It was just one single coin. Now, look closely. Does this coin look like nothing more than consumable to you? Haven't you ever wondered why Starstream uses these coins as the standard trading unit? Don't you find that strange? What bullshit are you trying to say now? While staring at the clones that had encroached right before his nose, the mass production type maker spoke up. Let me give you a hint. Everything within Starstream is created through fables. In that case, what about coins, then? Is this the sign of senility? I'm busy, so stop talking to me. Constellations focused on shooting out their magical energy at the space around them as if they no longer wanted to hear an old man's ramblings. Han Suyong, however, continued to listen even when still trapped in this urgent situation. And goosebumps broke out all over her skin. It was as exactly as the mass production type maker had said, everything in Starstream was a fable. In that case, why was the trading unit of Starstream not fables, but coins, instead? Su-cha-cha-chat. An enormous amount of probability was welling up all round the mass production type maker. And as he was bathed in the influence of that probability, his own status was rising up explosively. That gobsmacking rate of increase shocked the constellations of both good and evil, and they all looked at the mass production type maker. A very old fable has begun its storytelling. The mass production type maker, he too was a constellation pursuing his own version of a single story. In that case, what was the he was pursuing after? What rules this world is neither good nor evil. It's capital. He then chucked that coin high up in the air. Yu Yonghyuk saw it, so did Han Suyang, and Zhang Huiwen. But none of them saw how much was written on that coin. And I possess more coins than anyone in Starstream. More specifically, they would have believed whatever amount was claimed to be written on it. If one wanted to create a miracle like that with coins, how much would one need to spend? Someone has spent a lot of coins. Fable, materialism, has begun its storytelling. A short while later, a deafening boom resounded out from the other side of the sky where the coin had disappeared to. Accompanied by the ripping sound, a doorway whirling about opened up there. It was a gate. A one-way gate has been generated. The gate that only the Dakibis and the Bureau could open up was actually opened by a mere constellation. Starstream's Bureau is looking at the probability of the applicable scenarios. Summoning has begun. Several humanoid shapes began appearing beyond the gate itself. With a relaxed face belonging to a holiday maker, the mass production type maker shrugged his shoulders. Oh, by the way. You guys were right about one thing. I'm terrible at fighting. Blinding rays of light exploded from the other side of the gate. The old man put a pair of sunglasses on as if he'd been expecting that and continued on. Instead, I can bring a few friends who are very good at that by doing this. Some people were being summoned to the battlefield through the gate. The first one to recognize them was Yu Yonghyuk. Master? The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Transcenders were flying out of the gate now. There were several other familiar faces among the group beside her, too. Such as, the one invincible fist, Yu Hosong. One of the most powerful beings on the Isle of Reincarnators had entered this scenario in order to lend them aid. The reason for the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's belated arrival must have had something to do with persuading them to come here. However, Yu Yonghyuk's expression didn't improve even then. Will they be enough to stop this calamity? There were dozens of Calamity's clones, each so powerful that fable-grade constellations couldn't even deal with a single one. No matter how powerful the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint and Yu Hosong were, this enemy was not something a group of Transcenders could overcome. But then, there was one more familiar face right at the end of the descending Transcenders. Seriously, now. Should have helped us get here from the get-go, you know. It was Zhang Haiyang. A few companions shouted towards her, calling her over. She smiled embarrassedly and waved her hand back. Sorry about being so late. I was trying to persuade someone. Persuade? Zhang Haiyang couldn't continue on, however. Because the entrance of new, powerful beings caused the clones of the indescribable distance to change the direction of their attacks. Nervousness quickly dyed her expression as she watched the outer god approach her location. Zhang Haiyang had seen those things back in the demon world. She knew very well that the current her couldn't even deal with a single clone. That was with only her own powers, though. Right in the next instance, a golden aura exploded out from her figure. An incredible amount of status was being unleashed with her as its center. Her golden locks spread out like waves, and a slender golden headband appeared above her pale smooth forehead. And then, a beautiful golden-colored fur coat covered her entire body. She slowly opened her eyes to reveal the swirling ominous aura of golden gaze, fiery eyes. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is narrowing his eyes. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is surprised silly. Constellation, Goryo's first sword, is sighing out. All neutral-type constellations can't hide their astonishment. Everyone present recognized the owner of that status. It was impossible not to. Zhang Haiyang extended her hand out, and the world's heaviest staff found itself in her grip in the next moment. Boundlessly arrogant and aloof eyes glared at the azure sky, and every cloud in the world trembled all at the same time. Go and rescue Kim Dokja. Those words were not spoken by Jang Hyang. Constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, has incarnated into the scenario. Chapter 411. Climax. Part 3. During her adventures on the Isle of Reincarnators, Jang Hyang utilized the unidentifiable wall several times. She used its first stage function, chat system, to engage constellations in conversation. Demon King of Salvation Nim. Why are you calling me like that? From a certain moment on, she even got to talk to Kim Dokja as if nothing had happened, too. For a while there, she also wanted to deny that Demon King of Salvation equals Kim Dokja and ended up having a mental breakdown, but she had no choice but to come to terms with it now. The Demon King of Salvation Jang Hyang liked so much happened to be Kim Dokja, and the dimwit Kim Dokja was none other than the Demon King of Salvation. She barely managed to accept that fact now. Of course, she hadn't 100% accepted it, though. I was talking to Demon King of Salvation Nim. So, Kim Dokja should keep his mouth shut. It can't be helped, then. Don't say anything unnecessary, and just gimme the answers I want. What kind of answers are they? Now that he openly asked her that, the sorrow she'd been suppressing until now exploded onto the surface. Why don't you want me to join the Kim Dokja company? She always wanted to ask him that question. She watched her comrades use context of constellation and get to the next scenario, and was left behind along with the teachers at the rear of the scenario. She did want to go with them. She thought that it had been nice if she could become one of those shining stars, too. Is it because I lack the qualifications? Maybe, it's because I haven't been with Kim Dokja from the beginning of the scenarios. Jang Hyang remembered the times they shared during the revolution of the demon world as well as the Demon King selection fights. For the first time in her life, she experienced bliss during those moments, and now, they had become an indelible part of her. And that was why, she thought that she too had become Kim Dokja's comrade now. But, maybe, she was simply deluding herself. I'd like you to live a free life. Jang Hyang's anger suddenly bubbled up after hearing his reply. She wanted to shout back and ask, what kind of bullshit was that after they had come this far? But then, forcibly being transferred to another dimension and living in the demon world, neither of those were your choices, right? She couldn't argue with that. As if her breathing had come to a standstill, all she could do now was to read the incoming messages. Hyang, please live the life you want. Those words were coming from the Demon King of Salvation. Words of a high and mighty constellation, who was addicted to the fable of saving someone and periodically disregarded his own life. That was why these words were not from Jang Hyang's friend, Kim Dokja. His voice can't be heard anymore. The unidentifiable wall spoke to her. Even with the wall that allowed her to talk to any being in this world in an instant, she couldn't hear Kim Dokja's voice. He resolutely remained as the Demon King of Salvation, just like what she asked of him. Come on now. What do you want from me when you say stuff like that? That was why she wanted to hear Kim Dokja's voice. Unidentifiable wall is bearing its own name. That was why Jang Hyang was standing in this place. Unidentifiable wall is evolving into the wall of impossible communication. Second stage functionality of Wall of Impossible Communication is now available. She unlocked the power of her new wall, persuaded all the constellations that could aid Kim Dokja Company, and brought them to this place. All for the sake of the life she wanted to live, and not for anyone else. Suchachachat. The stupefied faces of the Kim Dokja Company members could be seen looking back at her. Jang Hyang shouted out, as the sensation of the status filling her head made her consciousness dimmer and dimmer. All of you, wake up and get a move on. I can't stay like this for long. She shouted, her mind submerging deeper and deeper. The presence of a constellation was taking over her entire incarnation body. Wall of Impossible Communication is currently activating Impossible Longing LV.1. The Impossible Longing, an ability of the Wall of Impossible Communication that allowed Jang Hyang to form a temporary sponsorship contract with a constellation, even though she had no sponsor backing. Constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is looking at his incarnation body. The prisoner of the golden headband, the great sage, heaven's equal, Sun Wukong. According to Kim Dokja, one of the greatest constellations in the star stream itself. That great and noble constellation scanned the world with his aloof, arrogant eyes, and spoke in a lofty tone of voice. Now that I'm here, it's kind of annoying. Zhang Haiyang became dumbfounded by that and yelled out. Ah? But, you said you'd help. And I even listened to your personal troubles, too. So, hurry up. Please. From her perspective, she couldn't help but be flabbergasted by this situation, but it wasn't as if she couldn't understand why the great sage, heaven's equal, said that. For some reason, his condition after incarnating into her body felt strange. Jujujujut. It was as if several different beings temporarily had become one creature, and his status felt unstable as a result. That annoyance he talked about might have something to do with that condition. However, that was his problem, not hers. If you don't keep your promise, then your hair will. I'm doing it. Look, I'm doing it. Sun Wukong replied in a voice full of dissatisfaction and grasped the Rui Bang. The status leaking out from his body caused several constellations to display their interest. Great sage, it'll be a suicide trying to send them back. Even if it's you, and who you might be? I'm Chiak Junjiang. As if to resist the great sage's status, Chiak Junjiang opened his chest wide. The former wordlessly studied the emotions etched in the latter's eyes, before throwing a question out. Hey, you. Do you know who this master son is, then? Chiak Junjiang needed a moment or two before realizing that this master son was the way the great sage, heaven's equal, referred to himself as. I'm well aware that you used to be a famous constellation in the past. Even then. Well, yeah, sure. It's been way too long since this great me did something in a scenario, hasn't it? Sun Wukong yawned disinterestedly, and after shrinking the size of the Rui Bang, he began digging his ear. Chiak Junjiang was about to blow his top from that arrogance, but then. Constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is unleashing his status. Not just Chiak Junjiang, but the incarnation bodies of other constellations near him were blown away in the air. His eyes opened wide in shock after sensing the powerful presence that could make other constellations shrink away by simply releasing its status. Look, the sparks. One of the suffering constellations cried out in pain. Yung Haiyang's body, with the great sage incarnated into it, was now completely enveloped with an insane amount of sparks. It was not an odd thing to see probability sparks appear when constellations unleash their statuses. The actual problem here was the fact that this area was currently going through the 89th scenario. In an area that could deal with most types of probability, such a blinding show of sparks taking place meant. Now, look. The sides of the 8 trigram, the Bagua, began spreading on all 4 cardinal directions of the great sage, heaven's equal. Jian, heaven/firmament, Te, lake/marsh, Yi, heart of fire, Jin, thunder, sun, wind, Gam, water, Gon, mountain, Gon, ground/earth. Those letters energetically spun around his Rui Jin Gubang, and emitted swirling golden light rays. The clones of the indescribable distance detected that vigorous aura and began flooding towards him. Suchachachuchit. The probability sparks were the precursor to the approaching storm of aftermaths. As if they were pouncing on a tasty prey, the clones of the indescribable distance opened their maws all at once towards the great sage. There were a total of 6 of them. Never mind fable-grade constellations, even a myth grade would find it difficult to deal with this many. However, the great sage didn't back down. The moment those vast fogs of darkness enveloped him, his entire figure suddenly lit up in the brightest golden rays of light. And then, his Rui Jin Gubang began piercing through the open mod fogs along with the vicious whirlwind. Kudu-do-do-do. Not once did the indescribable distance get damaged after getting struck by a Lone Star relic until now. But then, the spinning wheels created by the Rui Jingu Bang increased in number to hundreds in an instant and began pounding on the clones, and quite shockingly, horrifying screeches resounded out from the fogs. Gurururek. On top of that, one of the clones even tried to dodge the Rui Jingu Bang. Every constellation in the battlefield couldn't take their eyes off from the great sage's status as he dyed the sky in a spectacular shower of light and fought against the indescribable distance. That included Dionysus, Surya, and Chiok Junjiang. It's a technique of chaos. Hades immediately and accurately read the seditious power permeating within the Rui Jingu Bang held by the great sage. That power was neither good nor evil. It was a distinct Taoist technique that only the great sage, who had compiled unique fables for himself, could use. The Meiho Wang. Handsome Monkey King, the great sage, heaven's equal. The victorious fighting Buddha. The prisoner of the golden headband, Sun Wukong, who continued to exist under many different names, was fighting now. And he was engaged in a one versus many battle against the calamities of the void, something that even Chiok Junjiang could only barely defeat by giving his all. As if they didn't want to lose to him, two constellations decided to pitch in right then. Constellation, demon-like judge of fire, is wringing out all of her true powers. Constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is roaring out as if he doesn't want to lose. These two statuses were being overlaid on top of the great sages. The black flame from the dragon and Uriel's hellfire were combined into one and caused the Rui Jingu Bang to grow to an abnormal size. Fable forgotten under a lengthy period of time has begun its storytelling. And so, stars of good, evil, and neutral have gathered in one place. Three kinds of statuses were combined to cause an explosion of a blinding flash. Go-uhu. The Rui Jingu Bang, now boasting tremendous girth, slammed into the sky. The heaven and earth rocked violently, and the enormous shockwave distorted time and space itself. By the time the screaming constellations opened their eyes again, a huge hole had opened up in the sky once covered in the fog of darkness. The great sage spoke. Now, go. Three people didn't miss that opening and made their move. Yu Yonghyuk used air steps to run in the air, Han Suyang rode on the shadow clone of the black flame dragon, while Zhang Huiwan borrowed the wings of the archangel to shoot up vertically. All three of them penetrated past the fog of darkness and breached the boundary of the sky in an instant. The moment they escaped the atmosphere, though, their movements dulled rapidly. The cosmic space created by the clashes between the indescribable distance and the final dragon of the Book of Revelation was filled up with an astonishing amount of fables chaotically swirling around. Kuf. Blood trickled out from the corner of Han Suyang's lips at the unbelievable density of fables. Just sensing their presence alone was so painful that her body felt like it'd crumble away. Kim Dokja was somewhere in this space. Not too long afterwards, they located his trace, scattered around like breadcrumbs. Only by doing this will I be able to earn the proper climax. A broken fragment of Kim Dokja was floating aimlessly in the empty space. Zhang Huiwan was the first one to reach out. As if she was catching a very small and fragile bird, she cautiously brought that fragment into her bosom. Was she mistaken in thinking that she saw the distant world Kim Dokja wanted to reach just beyond the full stop of that sentence? After catching that sentence, and then another one. Just like crossing a monkey bar, by continuously moving one step at a time, they would arrive at the end of this trail. Han Suyang spoke. I guess you're also a constellation now, Kim Dokja. All constellations were addicted to fables, and in order to reach that single fable they pursued after, they indulged themselves on every other type of fable available. And that was why they didn't have a true substitute of themselves. Because they had to create all fables by their own hands in the end. My companions will acquire a fable that should allow them to oppose any nebula out there. Even if that fable was meant for other people. God damn it, since when did I ask you for this kind of story? The clones of the indescribable distance discovered the trio and rushed towards their location. Han Suyang shot black flame out from her hand, while Zhang Huiwan's sword of judgment activated hellfire. Yu Yonghyuk's breaking the sky swordsmanship, sliced through the space and opened up the path for them. Normally, they shouldn't have been able to fight against this calamity. The only reason why they could was because of the star existing at the end of that path. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, is still activating Stigma, Sacrificial Will LV.9. The Sacrificial Will, a deadly stigma that raised the combat capabilities of one's companions by risking one's life. After being strengthened by that starlight, Yu Yonghyuk swung his sword, Zhang Hui-wan unleashed more hellfire, and Han Suyang continued to punch over and over again. And eventually, they began sensing the faint presence of Kim Dokja. Like the breathing of a dying man, his weakened fables were telling them of his current location. Suchachachut. Suddenly, Uriel's and the Black Flame Dragon's status began dwindling rapidly. They had finally reached their limit, in other words. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is issuing a warning. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, says that he needs to use the bathroom and it'll be harder to use his powers. They finally spotted a pale, faint star on the far side of the thick fog of darkness. Yu Yonghyuk and Han Suyang both saw it. It felt so desperately within reach, if only they could extend their hands out. Unfortunately, the path to that star was fraught with much danger. The number of clones rushing in continued to grow, and the pressure of the statuses surrounding them was getting heavier quite quickly. All three no longer had much magical energy left in them as they had been flying like a one-way rocket with total disregard for fuel preservation. Kugugugugu. The distance towards the clones was getting shorter and shorter. If all three of them marched forward by breaking through all these clones, then never mind saving Kim Dokja, they wouldn't be able to return at all. However, what if they focused the remaining magical energy into only one person? There's only one way. All three of them stared at each other at the same time. They couldn't rescue Kim Dokja together, which meant that only one among them could reach that star. Chapter 411. Climax. Part 4. While stuck inside the fog that blocked their view, Yu Yonghyuk addressed his companions first. I shall be the one to save him. The dark heavenly demon sword, in his hand, began emitting the pure blue light. All of you are too exhausted. So, it's only correct that I continue on. Transfer your remaining magical energy to me. That prompted Zhang Huiwen to unsheath the Sword of Judgment and speak. Your own condition is just as messy as ours. I should be the one to go, instead. His brows quivered slightly. This would be the first time she came out this forcefully. Both of you better get out of my way. I alone am more than enough. And now, even Han Suyang butted in. The gazes of the two locked in a staring contest shifted over to her. Their eyes so clearly implied, we get why we want to go, but what's up with you now, causing her to pout unhappily. Why are you staring at me like that for? What, I shouldn't rescue Kim Dokja? I thought you didn't like Dokja SSI? Ah, of course I don't like him. Now normally, she'd have dumped such annoying responsibility on Yu Yonghyuk's shoulders. Unfortunately, she had a reason to step up this time around. Just as Kim Dokja rushed forward aboard Surya's train, a message from him flew in at her, that was why. Hey, you're going to rescue me, right? If only she didn't hear that message. Han Suyang grumbled inwardly and was about to open her lips to speak, only for Zhang Huiwen to snatch the initiative away. I'm sorry, but Dokja SSI personally asked me to save him. So, I can't yield to you nor to this guy, not this time. What rubbish are you talking about? Kim Dokja asked me to save him. Stop lying. There's no way he'd ask you to do that. Arg, I'm not lying, it's the truth. You think I'm a habitual liar just because my job was a writer? Their gazes collided in midair. And at that very moment, Han Suyang was overcome with this rather strange feeling. Initially, she thought that Zhang Huiwen was lying in order to save that moron up there. But when she thought about it some more, this woman wasn't the type to lie about stuff like that. She abruptly turned her head to the side, only to find Yu Yonghyuk forming a scary scowl. Hey, by any chance, you. With indescribable rage filling up his expression, he then began glaring at the distant star. It was at this point that Han Suyong finally realized something. Hang on, could this be? Could that bastard, Kim Dokja? The star continued to faintly shine in the distance. It was almost as if she could glimpse Kim Dokja's smirking face there. Goo. The hole in the sky the great sage had opened up was gradually filling back up. The clones, hesitating in fear, regained themselves, and the fog of darkness was blanketing the world once more. And then, the noise from the apocalypse dragon's shockwave reverberated around like crashing waves. Constellations were jolted wide awake, and they all looked up at the great sage. My bad, but I can't do that for the second time. I'm already breaking the rules as is. The great sage spun the Rui Bang around, and as if he found it all rather annoying, shrunk the pole to store it inside his ear. Nebula Emperor's promise has been invoked against the constellation, prisoner of the golden headband. The great sage that was pressuring the indescribable distance until now began scattering away. As if his body was being torn into several pieces, his clear-as-day status began crumbling away, and right before the end, he issued one final message. Hey, you lot. If you keep standing around looking dazed, you'll all die soon. Everyone, attack. If we're pushed back now, we'll all die for sure. Dionysus and the constellations of Olympus had replenished their energy by then, and unleashed their statuses towards the sky. Those from Underworld also stopped preserving their strengths and made their move, as well. The Korean Peninsula's constellations concentrated their powers on E.G. High, and soon, Turtle Dragon's cannons fired blinding rays of energy. Some began fighting, while some began resisting. It was not the same for everyone, however. Like falling meteors, stars from the sky continued to fall. Constellations from Vedas and Papyrus trying to escape, stars with their modifiers already known, and those who weren't, were caught up in the battle for supremacy between the apocalypse dragon and an outer god, and were crashing to the ground, as if to announce that the age of the stars was coming to an end. Metatron was looking up at the sky. The information Jopiel, the commander of the Crimson Cosmos, had sent from the 1863rd turn didn't mention any of this. Currently, both of his hands were occupied with creating the sealing tool to seal away the apocalypse dragon. This tool, created by gathering every fable of Eden as well as those belonging to absolute good. Jopiel said as thus. Scribe, you'll die using this, but the world will remember the good once more. She definitely said that. So how come? The target cannot be sealed. Even though the sealing tool was almost complete, the apocalypse dragon couldn't be sealed away. He didn't know why. He couldn't even figure out how and from where things went wrong, either. Was it due to reviving the dragon too early? Or, could it be because the indescribable distance had interfered? Was the Demon King of Salvation the main culprit as he suspected? If they were all wrong, then maybe, Jopiel. At the end of his vision, he saw Michael, inching closer to his death, with half of his incarnation body gone. As long as Eden existed, he'd be able to revive, but with this, the nebula would disappear. Not just it, though, but even the entirety of Starstream would start crumbling away. Have you already given up? That's quite unlike you. Metatron looked back and his expression hardened instantly. Did you come here to kill me? You'd die anyway even if I don't do anything, so why should I even bother? The ruler of East Hell, Agars, cackled raucously before frowning a bit. Most ancient evil has begun its storytelling. With that message, Metatron realized why Agars had come back here. The Archangel spoke. For a short while there, I was envious of you. Envious of the fact that you could so easily abandon the fable of evil and leave, just like that. Lying is one of the virtues of evil. Have you forgotten that already? Agars laughed again, sounding as if he was sick and tired of it. Metatron understood the meaning of that laughter better than anyone. The good and evil, they might be on the opposing sides, but they understood each other better than anyone else in this world. They would not be able to escape from this fable until their dying moments. Because this fable was already them by now. Most ancient good has begun its storytelling. Most ancient evil has. Shut up. Just how long will this stinking story continue its beginning crap? Agar scowled after seeing the fables rise up. Most ancient evil is quietly staring at the ruler of East Hell. It's about time you stop, don't you think? Agar shoved his hand into his inner pocket and pulled out a rolled cigarette. Accompanied by the cheek noise, the cigarette was lit on fire and the smoke spread around in the air. The number of stars falling continued to increase, and the clones of the indescribable distance began to devour all the fallen constellations. And from afar, the apocalypse dragon's roar could be heard, too. What a spectacular scenery this is. It's the ideal stage to end this long, dragged-out fight. The leaders of the good and the evil stared at this spectacle. The tragedy taking place here all began with these two. It was around then that they heard a bizarre noise coming from behind. A clone had snuck closer without being detected and had its maw wide open in Metatron's direction. Demon King, the ruler of East Hell, is revealing his status. Kudu-doo-doo. The clone rushing in to rip and devour the Archangel at any second faltered and stopped moving. Agar's hands reached out and grabbed hold of the clone's mouth, trying to shut close. He was none other than the Demon King ranked second in the hierarchy. Out of the current crop of Demon Kings, he was the only one capable of contending for supremacy against a myth-grade constellation. Agar spoke while chewing on the cigarette. What are you blankly looking at? Were you planning to become a martyr or something? Although it was only for a brief moment, I did think that maybe that's not such a bad idea. You should finish the things you've started first. I'm telling you to finish the great war of saints and demons properly as befitting the high and mighty scribe of heaven. It's impossible. The power of the apocalypse dragon is far greater than I expected. Using the wall's power should be sufficient. Even resorting to that power isn't enough to seal the apocalypse dragon away. I figured as much. However, you'll still be able to save the ones here. After all, the wall exists to protect something, doesn't it? Those words caused Metatron's eyes to tremble. What are you talking about? You always needed to be told twice before you could understand. Agar's was there, still pouring out the vicious status towards the clones. Metatron had fought against that Demon King for a very long time. Even then, he had never seen that kind of an expression from the latter before. At that moment, good and evil looked at each other. The Demon King's eyes looked at the other dying Demon Kings and Archangels. Wouldn't good and evil be able to carry on to the next generation only after these fools are saved from this mess? That is a funny thing for a Demon King to say. I'm only saying it now, but to me, you don't look much like an Archangel yourself. Metatron heard Agar's sullen voice and couldn't help but feel strange. Why did the demon he fought against for such a long time feel so close today? Were their current actions for the sake of good or for evil? Metatron couldn't tell. But he was sure of one thing. Fable of the most ancient good and evil is looking at you. Even if they had become the fable itself, what they chose to do now wasn't because fables told them to do so. I can't do this alone. I know. Wall that divides good and evil is violently shaking. With one wall between them, the representatives of good and evil extended their hands towards each other. Even if we save them here, we still can't stop the apocalypse. I also know that. Agar's placed his hand on top of the sealing tool Metatron had created. But then, that's not a problem we should worry about. The Archangel and the Demon King held each other's hands. With that, the sealing tool emitted blinding rays of light and began expanding at a rapid pace. And soon, it couldn't be called a tool anymore, but a large ship, instead. Kugugugugu. It was an ark that once upon a time protected all beings above ground from the destruction of a world. A mythical vessel that descended to the world in order to protect life itself against the Great Flood. Metatron spoke. Evacuate the constellations. Understood, scribe. The master of the Ark, standing among the constellations, heard Metatron's call and took command of the vessel. The surviving Valkyries began helping the constellations and incarnations in the near vicinity to board the Ark one by one. However, Metatron and Agars had to support the Ark's fable and couldn't board it themselves. It wasn't only those two who knew that fact, unfortunately. "You've done something quite foolish, O ruler of the East Hell." Asmodeus. Not even giving him time to say something, Asmodeus's claws penetrated deeply into Agars's heart. Even then, the latter's expression remained unflustered as he stared at the face of impending death. Looking displeased by that expression, Asmodeus spoke. "Why don't you give up the wall to me now? You no longer have the qualifications to represent evil. The claws sunk in even deeper and dug out Agars's innards. Pitch-black fables dripped out as the Demon King spoke. "What a persistent bastard you are. Why do you desire the wall this badly anyway? Do you honestly believe that you can become a god by possessing the wall? I know very well that possessing it won't turn me into a god. However, at the bare minimum, I'd become one of the cowards belonging to the final scenario. I see. So, you knew about the final scenario, didn't you?" Agars chuckled bitterly, but then, madness suddenly brushed past his eyes. "Sorry, but you can't become the owner of that wall. That's not for you to decide. Besides, when you die, your wall will, you see, I've already handed my wall over to someone else. That sort of a..." It was then, Asmodeus's shoulders suddenly flinched. Through the instincts of a demon king, it realized that what Agars had said was true. Just to who? Well now, that's something for you to find out. Asmodeus roared out in anger and its claws pierced into Agars's neck. As the fragments of fables splattered around like real blood, the latter looked up into the sky. "Isn't this quite beautiful, Metatron? This is our end." The duet of good and evil dimly continuing on was now flowing within the night sky of the apocalypse. He saw the cascading meteor shower and grinned brightly. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, is currently activating Sacrificial Will LV.9. That's really pissing me off. Seriously. I can't even switch that off either. Han Suyong panted angrily and shouted out loudly. Still stuck inside the ever-expanding fog of darkness, the three of them were fighting against the clones that seemed to increase in number with every passing second. They knew that Kim Dokja was just beyond here. But it was impossible to break past this fog of darkness with the remaining magical power each of them had. So, the best thing they could do under the circumstances was to concentrate their energy into one person right now. Even though they knew that, the trio didn't want to yield. If it was simply about Kim Dokja Sake, then it wouldn't have mattered who went there. While looking at the distant star faintly flickering away, all three of them were thinking the same thing. The odds of the one heading towards that star dying were very high. The fog of darkness was getting heavier and thicker, and the apocalypse dragon's shockwave was also getting more violent as well. Kim Dokja was still alive. However, the odds of saving him were low. And even if he was rescued, they'd still die alongside him, anyway. And so, this bickering wasn't about choosing who gets to save him, but to find the person who'd die for someone else, instead. "Both of you know this already, but I cannot die," said Yu Yonghyuk first. Zhang Huiwen knew what he meant by cannot die and was about to get angry, but then, Han Suyong was a step faster than her. "You need to think about this carefully, Zhang Huiwen. You aren't going to die alone, remember that." Right then, Zhang Huiwen felt the weight of the cross on her back. She had nothing to retort back with. If she died here, then the person on her back would die as well. "In that case, you take over Hyeonsong SSI for a, Zhang Huiwen. Behind you." She reflexively looked behind her after hearing Han Suyong's yell. However, there was nothing there. The moment she went, someone pushed her from behind, and while staggering ungainly, she fell back towards the ground below. By the time she unfurled the Archangel's wings to stop her fall, the figures of both Yu Yonghyuk and Han Suyong had grown so far away. "Damn it. What's the Maya? Stop, both of you." After seeing the two hurriedly grow distant without even bothering to receive her magical energy, she instantly figured out what they were trying to do here. And because she knew now, there was simply no way that she'd suppress her emotions welling up. Kim Dokja asked her to save him. However, in order to do that, she couldn't chase after those two. Boreal. She swallowed back her boiling emotions and extended her hand out. The magical power of an archangel reaching out from her hand pierced past the darkness and formed blinding wings on the backs of the flying duo. It was right then, she felt a powerful throb on her back, coming from a certain someone's heart. It palpitated powerfully, as if he had something to say. Zhang Huiwan replied. Me too, Hien Song SSI. She watched the two arrows of light traverse through the space and get further away, and then, at the faint, weak starlight waiting for them just beyond their reach. She bit down on her lower lip as if she was enduring against something. But, I think it's not our turn yet.